Now, it is my duty tonight and a real honor and privilege to invite a very special guest who is here to join us for this series of events, Ambassador Hynek Kmoníček, Ambassador to the United States from the Czech Republic, currently since early last year. I had the privilege of actually meeting him here in Lincoln last October when he came with a group of friends from the Czech Republic to celebrate our own Dr. Mila's honorary consul appointment here as the honorary consul to Nebraska. Let me tell you just a little bit about our ambassador. He studied English and Arabic language studies at Charles University in Prague, and modern history of the Middle East and Hebrew and Arabic languages studies at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. His diplomatic career has spanned over 2 decades, joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic in 1995. He's the long-term director of the Foreign Affairs Department in the Office of the President of the Czech Republic, and has held several positions during his tenure as a diplomat. Director of North Africa and Middle East Department, the Director General for Asia, Africa, and America, and the Deputy Foreign Minister. He served as the ambassador of the Czech Republic to Australia, to India, and most recently to the UN in New York. Ambassador Kmoníček helped a Czech scientist. This is a little special thing to tag you to Nebraska, Ambassador. We have a very big entomology department here, so you'll see how this fits. He helped a Czech scientist who was arrested by Indian officials in 2008 for illegally collecting rare beetles. We don't do that at Nebraska, I was going to say. In 2015, that scientist, Emil Kučera, discovered a beetle in China, which he then named appropriately Anthaxia Kmoníček for Ambassador Kmoníček. So we're in the presence of someone named, has a beetle named after him. As I mentioned, he was previously the Czech Republic's ambassador to the UN, continues to live in New York with his wife Indira Gumrava, son, and 3 daughters. This past year, in 2017, he was appointed to his current position as the ambassador to the United States of America from the Czech Republic. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Hynek Kmoníček.
Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here back in Nebraska, the state with the highest percentage of the people of the Czech origin in the United States. If I remember correctly, we scored like 5.5% of the citizens of Nebraska in the last census, and I believe we are going to have more children, so we will get even bigger over the years. I should limit my remarks to a very few remarks because usually the most boring part of any conference is remark of ambassadors. As you've heard, nothing from what I went through qualified me to speak today about Prague Spring 50 years ago. But they are the things which are relevant from the Prague Spring even for my generation, and I happen to be 6 years old when this traumatic event happened. Because even if we do not acknowledge it very often, we actually live still in the 60s. Chancellor, you are right. Most of what we believe in started in the 60s. We are still listening to the music of the 60s, which we call modern because we dilute the melodies of the 60s, but this is still postmodern 60s we are listening to. We are still living in the architecture of the 60s because I think it was in the 60s when came this crazy idea that the downtowns of the towns should be high-rises with no people. and people should live in some concrete boxes far away on some highway. We still inhabit the 60s, and we also inhabit the intellectual countryside of the 60s. Basically, everything what we deal today has the beginning in the 60s. If we deal with environment, organic food, well, these are the flower children of 1968. If we deal with globalism and the idea that everybody counts, everybody is interconnected, that's the basically hippies idea, which through many permutations ended up with globalism, global village, and multiculturalism. And we also live with the heritage of the second half of the 20th century, where one of the major questions was, is socialism possible or not? If it is possible, is it livable or not? And in that way, the events in Prague 1968 are not part of the Czech history only, they are the parts of the world history. Because everything what happened in Prague during this half a year was basically a Czech attempt to answer some of these questions. The question was, for example, if the socialist regimes that time existing are real socialist, if you can reform them. If you reform them, will they collapse? Is it possible to have something like a socialism with a human face in the time when Brezhnev started wearing a new face after Khrushchev? All these questions were answered in Prague, and they were not just the questions of the Czech national history, they were the questions of the world history. And I am very grateful that the University of Nebraska and Department of History is very much aware of this overlap of the Czech and the world history, as this conference we are just about to open is the best proof. Obviously, there was also the Czech angle of all the events which happened between January and August 68, but actually many months before and many years after. 1968 was also for many of the Czechs one of the answers if there is something like a special Slavic brotherhood. Can we rely on the Slavic brotherhood with relation to that time Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation? Or the result will be that one day you wake up and you have tank under your window, and next year you are American? That's not what you expected mostly from your life. It was also the Czech try to understand where the Czech identity is. As we live in the place which is partly Eastern Europe, partly Central Europe, and we believe that we have a completely Western European culture. All these questions were tried and lost with the Soviet tanks in August 1968 on the streets of Prague. For many people, also in this hall, it is not just the history. It's the big part of their life. Sometimes it is their personal story. But we all know that the questions which were opened in the late 60s are still with us. And the answers are relevant of for what we believe today. What do we want from ourselves today? And I believe that the conference will give me some answers to these questions. And I believe that we all will be listening to the participants who will share their knowledge and their personal stories with us starting from tomorrow. So one more time, let me thank the organizers for giving us the chance to have this conference and that many Czechs and that much knowledge in one room in Nebraska, because where else? So let me conclude with that and invite on the podium somebody who you will probably know. That's the celebrated alumni of the University of Nebraska, the person who is behind almost everything what has the label Czech in Lincoln. Ms. Čapková, the floor is yours. Thank you.